All right. It is my honor to have Evan Doukas, a good friend of mine, YouTuber, gardener, musician, join me for a conversation today. Hi, Evan.
Always good, Derek.
So, Evan, you were also a guest while I was on a radio program on 88.1 KPFZ community radio in Lakeport, California.
I remember that.
Yeah, so you're the first one to bridge my talk radio days with the podcasting and YouTubing days.
Yeah, I remember that. That was a lot of fun. Yeah,
Yeah,
I love coming to Lake County to visit you. And as you know, Derek, I love the Mediterranean growing climate. Speaking of growing, so I'm always jealous, but always having a great time visiting my friends in Northern California and just having all these plant geek moments.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So Evan, what's your background? Like, what was your home life growing up, and how did you get into the things that you're into today?
Yeah, keeping it short, but my father is from Greece. He's Greek. Great man. He's from the Peloponnese, Sparta region. Grew up in a small mountain town that barely knew electricity at the time. Like buried their food in their cheese in the ground to keep it going all year. And
Wow.
pulled water up out of a well. He explains that sometimes there were like worms at the bottom of the drinking water glass. So.
Oh.
Yeah. So total third world, which is just incredible because, his generation here was, it was totally first world and total stark difference from the way that my mom grew up compared to my dad. But so on that side, I'm first generation American. My mom is Italian American, so full Italian. So as you would guess, I grew up with really good food and food adventures.
Nice.
My father, and I should mention my father is a chef. So, Greek chef, Italian mom, enough said. Over in New York, enough said. So gardening and food and farm to table type of thing, even though it was the backyard of the table, was just kind of a way of life. Not that we grew all of our food. My dad had to work a lot, but yeah, it was just great to be exposed to that kind of culture and have an appreciation for gardening and food at a young age. Didn't realize how much I loved it until I moved out to Colorado here to start my own family and to attempt to garden in this crazy, very difficult mountain west high altitude growing zone known as Colorado. But got into it, really into the challenge anyway. It's really fun. And as I began to learn tricks and tips and just, from a lot of mistakes gardening in this challenging climate, it kind of prompted me to begin to just want to share some stuff on YouTube. And, I guess it's just gained enough interest to keep going with it. And I'm just glad if it blesses people with things. And then going back one more time with the more important thing, by far, infinitely more important. I grew up in a sort of Christian household. My mom went to church at a Methodist church, and she brought us kids to church. My dad worked, but yeah, it was she was just a great woman, a solid woman, Christian woman, and brought us to church. But in this type of church, it was great because I got a background of knowing something about God in Christianity. But I always explain that in my own personal life, I didn't know God. I knew about him. I didn't know him. So when I was about 16, I got more serious about my faith, received him in my heart, heard the gospel loosely at some point and said, okay, I'm going to get serious about this. And then about 5 years ago, when I was about 30 years old, it's hard to explain to you, except that God really pulled me in like never before. And I felt like I heard the real gospel for the first time ever, which is just like it was in its kind of fullness, and it just gripped me. And I really just got pulled in and consumed by God, and it changed my life forever, and realized that I'm just absolutely never going back. And that gospel being that, basically looking at the big picture, like in the beginning, God created us in his image, his likeness, and to have fellowship with him, to walk with him in the cool of day. The father with his children, the children were with their father, mm-hmm. And it was good and it was beautiful. And most of us know the story, obedience sin, all that happened, deception, and that became the wall between us and God, and we were cut off from love and life himself, and we were separated from him. So when Jesus died on the cross and shed his blood for us, he more than just forgave our sins, and if I talk like this to a lot of Christians, sometimes they might get a little upset at me, but I try to make the point that, like, Jesus didn't just die for your sins, he died for you. And he needed to remove the sin, get it out of the way so he can get you back. So a lot of times we preach he forgave our sins, and that's so true, but the Bible takes it way further than that. That should actually be the beginning. That's like the means to the end and not the end. The way that the Bible puts it is that it's actually a form of, it's actually reconciliation. So forgiveness is like God saying, like, okay, I'm okay with you now, I forgive you for your sins. But reconciliation is like having this with God once again, being restored to those things that we just said that we lost in the beginning, right? His image, likeness upon the face of the earth, his nature, right? And then also our relationship with him. So that hit me, man, because I was like, wow, like I can actually really know the God of the universe. I'm not just called to know about him. And wow, like he actually died for me because I have a purpose, a value, and a destiny, and he wanted me back. And so I said, wow, God, like I give it to you. I am yours. Like,
were you gardening at that point whenever this moment happened?
I was. I sure was.
Yeah, I just wonder, like, how influential that was. The fact that what you're describing in Genesis 1, 2, and 3, that's the location is the garden on the mountain with the rivers flowing from that to the other corners of the world. And that Alistair Roberts put it this way in his book, Echoes of Exodus, that our story doesn't begin with Exodus, right? It begins in the garden with exile, where it's like, it starts good. It starts really good. And there's, a union of heaven and earth. There's a good relationship between God and man and woman, and man and beast, and all of creation. And then the story goes into exile, and then we start building cities. So, I just think about that because from what I know about watching your videos, the ones that you shared with me privately, which I still refer to, and the ones that you post on your channel, even the one that you posted with the before and after with the food forest video, is like, you did this in the city. You built up your garden in the city. And I think that's notable too, because as viewers go to go watch your videos from here, they'll see that you're working with a half acre. There's bounds, there's the road on one side, neighbors on other sides. And here you're able to have this life spring up in which it used to be like a gravelly asphalt. And then you're able to come back to restore it to a place of fertility and production and life.
Absolutely. And by the way, it's a quarter acre.
Oh, a quarter. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, last time I checked, it was like 0.24. So like,
well, that makes it even the more so impressive. Thank you for that.
No, and to get back to what you sort of asked was, how that may have corresponded with this spiritual awakening.
Yes.
And God calling me that way. Yeah, it actually completely corresponds, Derek. Yeah, it's really amazing. Perhaps what's funny is the first thing I learned was actually that restoration, that regeneration, before I learned a spiritual regeneration. I'd love to say it's the opposite, because we know that first comes the spiritual things, and through the Spirit, right? Like Hebrews, it says that by faith God created the world with a word, so that the visible things are actually made out of the invisible. Like now we call that like quantum physics, because we're seeing that in the quantum field.
Right. Yes.
Right. But like, this thing has been known for a while. But yeah, so around 2013, like maybe just a few years before that great awakening I was exposed to Paul Gauci of Back to Eden, the Back to Eden video film method.
Yes.
It's incredible. And it really was sort of sort of a foreshadowing, a prophetic foreshadowing of what I would experience spiritually soon after. But here's the biggest thing, and here's how they really intertwine beautifully. See, so I used to think that being a Christian was about saying this prayer, someday I can go to heaven, and between now and then, just try to do good, just strive and work to be a good person, to always self-improve. And I mean, some Christians might be listening to something like this at any time and be like, well, yeah, but no. I learned that Jesus didn't die so that I don't have to. Jesus died so that I can join him in his death. And then also he rose again so I can be raised again to brand new life. In fact, I think it's actually, I have my Bible right here. It's actually right here. Romans 6, it says, we were buried therefore with him by baptism into his death, in order that just as Christ was raised from the dead by the glory of the Father, we too might walk in newness of life. So in the permaculture world, we talk about regeneration all the time now, right? It's like one of the hot buzzwords, like regenerate.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. But this is a spiritual principle to me. So I'm not a Christian to have a better life or an improved life. I'm actually truly a Christian to have a brand new life. It's a total regeneration. It's a dying to my old nature that was sinful and corrupt, bad, sin, whatever you want to call it in this day and age. We don't have to look far to see the evidence of that, right? So I die to that and then completely experience a brand new life. So what Back to Eden method, and even just observing nature and creation, and what Paul Gauci showed me was that it wasn't a matter of tilling the soil and trying to weed and get everything right. That's kind of a curse, man. That's because of your disobedience, now you will have to work the land with the sweat of your brow. That's before Eden, or that's after Eden, right?
Yep.
But the fact is, when you smother what's there already, and you put that organic material on top, everything dies. But out of death, life, right? So we have this regeneration. So yeah, man, totally. It's a really awesome intuitive question of you to ask, because I realize that I have freedom now because I've been regenerated, man. I mean, I was not happy with myself. I was not okay with myself. And you know what? God invited me to take on a brand new self, to die to myself. And I said, I'm totally in. And the last thing I'll say with that is that it seems that every other religion, belief system, the thought systems of this world, it's all about self-improvement, right? But this gospel, this truth about the Son of God and what he did for us, and this rescue plan, is really the only place that I see complete death and a brand new you, the you that God intended from the beginning. And he did what he had to do to restore that to the restoration of all things.
Yeah, I just think of one of your videos. It has a garden bed that looks pretty old and tired, and there's weeds growing, and you're instead of trying to till this thing or getting the shovel, you don't even use a shovel. You lay cardboard down, then you have what was mulch and compost and organic material, and just layer it in a certain way. And you're boom, now you're ready to drop plants and seeds in here and it's ready to go. And it was okay, well, that was pretty practical. But
yeah, and I didn't do.
Go ahead, Evan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I didn't do a thing except just lay down the right foundation, just lay down the right stuff. And the magic all happens underneath the soil, underneath the whole surface line. Everything just happens, and everything just comes to life, and life starts in the soil, which I don't want to go down, that might be a long one, but it's just incredible, soil life and what happens. And really, you realize, like Paul Gauci always said, we work really hard to fail in modern agriculture, and it's this complete undoing in my mind as it pertains to gardening, where I'm on this quest to just see how crazy deep it gets, of how easy it can be to get the maximum amount of results. It seems like as long as I lay down the right stuff, it really, like, the more I'm out of the equation, like the more I step back and just observe, the more things happen full of life and full of success without working hard. And it kind of, like, again, it just kind of goes back to, like, wow, it's finding myself through, like, another identity, a brand new one that God gave me, instead of trying to work and strive, which is just like empty religion.
Yeah. And I think that it's interesting how that correlates to the garden too, because the garden is a theme that is from the first book all the way through to the last book of the Bible. And it was one of the most predominant themes of the parables that Christ gave. Unless a seed be sown into the ground, right, it's not going to spring up with new life. And unless it's sown, then you think of like all of the herbs, and then they grow into a tree where the birds of heaven can make their home. And so it's like, it's like tying together all of these incredible themes from Genesis all the way through. But what I also really like is how Paul Gauci, who you mentioned, what he does is, I remember watching his original documentary. Gosh, it must be like 8 or 9 years ago now. And I just loved it because he was walking through the woods. It shows him with his cane, and he's just like this contemplative elder man. And he's saying, I was just having these questions that kept coming up. I'm like, why does it have to be so hard? Why? Why does growing plants have to be so hard? And then he suddenly he got answers, and God was showing him how, look at the forest. Like, those plants, they don't need tending. There's no labor involved. So, like, I've made it good. Like, you can see the pattern in there, and I want you to, bring it home, so to speak. And that's what he identifies as, like, that layered mulch with the compost. And the documentary goes on from there. But I just wonder too, like, maybe you could describe some of the other features, like the specific practices or the features that you find work really well in your garden, but then also ones that you think that other people should try out because they've been a success for you.
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing I'll go to, because it's always good, and again, through this whole conversation, it's probably going to be like physical, spiritual, right?
Yes. Yes.
But to always focus on the soil, to, like, garden and cultivate soil, not plants, or at least soil more than plants. Like what I believe I learned through this process is always look beneath, like, the scene, right? The scene realm, and go deeper. So I used to be all about the plants, like tending to the plants, seeing if there's any pests on the plants. And if there were pests on the plants, I would treat that pest or sickness at the leaf level, right? Like, for the plant, and then hopefully it gets better. But this is almost like holistic and functional medicine today versus, like, modern medicine as well. Like, in the food and drug industry, like, instead of treating the symptom, like, right at the place where you see it, you actually go deeper and see everything as a whole system, right? But in this case, realizing that down by the roots, like, what that plant is rooted in has everything to do with the success of your garden. So if you're thinking of it more like, hey, I'm going to tend to and feed my soil, and really focus on my soil structure, and begin to understand what creates good soil, like, you will be successful no matter what. And even going back to pests, I've tried this just for fun. Instead of decimating the spider mites or aphids, instead of, like, working so hard to take care of them at the leaves, I've actually treated them by treating the plant well, by treating the soil well. And a lot of times the pest actually goes away because the plant is empowered by its own natural abilities to stave off or keep off pests, because a healthy plant is most often not a plant that's susceptible to issues. So it's about the plant health. And in order to get good plant health, it's all about the soil. So always start with the soil. And that's like, man, if someone comes to me and needs some help with even life, because technically I'm a pastor, and which is crazy because I said I'd never be a pastor, and man, I mean, just all this stuff just means so much to me, and just finding out this gospel, this truth that I get to like live and wake up in every day just means so much to me. And it means so much to me to share this with people whenever I have the opportunity, just to share love and goodness, man. Yeah, so I just mentioned that. But if someone comes to me with an issue, now I've learned to like go to the root of the issue. Don't just treat it at the surface, right? This, this thing runs through and through. So what the plants are rooted in is most important. Start with the soil, cultivate soil, make pretend you're just gardening soil, and learn what makes soil healthy. Learn how like it could be naturally aerated and full of life and nutrients, which brings me kind of to the next thing, which also, this works in my climate and any climate, is to add organic matter. It's like literally that simple. But more specifically, mulch, like mulching in layers, because all you're doing is you are implementing a natural process that we observe in nature. Wherever we see some place that's lush and beautiful, we see a whole lot of mulch on the ground and a lot of wood product, a lot of leaves, some nitrogen rich things, but it's always in layers. But you have the opportunity to do that much quicker. You can build soil very quickly, but by adding different layers. Lasagna gardening is great. Back to Eden is great. But mulch changed my gardening life. It was such a game changer because like you said, it's practically asphalt. There's this stuff called road base, which is just a cheap way of making a driveway. But some previous owners had done this. In my entire yard, it was like mountain granite with like clay, and they crush it and mix it and they lay it down. It gets compacted so that basically nothing can, no weeds can grow in it, and it repels water. It's basically almost like asphalt. So I add organic matter and mulch to that type of soil, and today it's exactly where the food forest is in that 3-step process video. So really adding organic matter, adding the mulch is incredible, because everything beneath it begins to transform. Paul Gauci said this way, like if you have bare soil, it's almost like an open wound, right? Like you need to protect it, because the elements like the sun are very harsh on your soil. So as soon as you put something over it, now your microbes, your worms, everything in the soil is much happier. It could come all the way up by the surface or go all the way down. It also leads to more moisture retention, which is huge in my region and yours, right? But moisture retention is huge. If you have sandy soil, which we don't, it'll help to create more absorptive properties in your sandy soil. If you have clay soil, it'll help break up your clay, because the microbes and worms themselves are more comfortable, and there's more of them, and now they're breaking things up. So you have that. You also have like a padding against weeds growing as easily, because seeds just don't fall on open soil. You open it up like where you want the seeds to be planted. So there's less weeding, and even the weeds that I do ever have to pull, they come out like nothing. I mean, like a dandelion, just like you see the whole tap root. It's actually so rewarding. Sometimes I want more of them to grow just so I can weed them. And the last thing is that it like when you have a good rich mulch. I'm not talking about the pretty stuff, by the way, that you get at Home Depot loaded with like dyes and who knows what else. Just like good old fashioned leaves and forest mulch. I love going to the tree service companies and seeing if they would just dump a load of wood chips. So all it is ground up trees. So you have your browns and your green matter, right? Your carbon and your nitrogen. But the last thing also, I wanted to mention, and there's even more benefits in this, but these are the main ones, is that it constantly feeds your soil, because through time and gravity, it's breaking down slowly. And every time you water it or it rains, it's slowly leaching all those good nutrients, macro and micro nutrients down into the soil, more life, more microbes. It's incredible, because it's like, once you get that sweet spot, it's like every time it rains, you are watering your garden. Like your garden is getting watered with compost tea, essentially.
Wow. Yeah, I looked at your before and after, and I was like, my first instinct would be like tractor, like heavy machinery, like get this rocky asphalt stuff out of here. And you just laid it right on top, and now it has like medium-sized trees and vines and like bushing plants. And I love it, like kind of like the selfie cam, and you're like, it feels like you're weaving through this maze or this trail through the woods or something, but it's just like what your front driveway is between the sidewalk and your house.
Definitely, man. Yeah, it's so fun. It is kind of a stark difference between my yard and my neighbor's yard. And the crazy thing is, like, what you see on YouTube and stuff, it's so little compared to what it would be if I didn't like work full time and stuff. A lot of these years is just like, I just have time to plant and like do a little bit of watering and like harvest, man. I mean, like if I had more time, if I was doing this even part-time, just more time. I mean, my whole yard, it would just be a jungle. It would be an absolute, like the whole yard would be a food forest. My wife always laughs at me, like, the lawn is slowly like getting smaller and smaller, like closing in on it. One more thing too, that's connected to the mulch, as far as like, just advice for methodology that works across different regions, is also, the no-till. I mean, I know our friends in the UK call it no dig, but the no-till method is fantastic. It really does work. No one in nature is ever tilling or fertilizing or watering, for that matter, right?
Right.
And neither should we. As long as you are adding like that beautiful organic matter, again, I recommend in layers. You never should have to till again in your life. Like, I'll probably never till. I'm not adamant on that, as far as like, okay, if you've got this plot of land and you want to get to work right away and you've got hard soil, okay, like till, to start, right? If you've got time, it's better off to just smother that grass or whatever you've got.
Yeah, that's helpful.
And do it that way that I lay out. But if you got a till to begin with, go for it. But I'm talking about, like, you should never have to till again. What it does to your soil structure is, it's like, imagine like a 2 or 3 story home or even apartment building, and like, and someone just churning it up and just shaking it around. You've got people and furniture and things like, that were really comfortable on one floor, now on the third, and on the second to the first. And it's just a mess. And that's how it happens in soil structure. Your microbes and everything that take a long time to build this beautiful soil structure are now getting really messed up. And that's why it seems really great when you first till something. You're like, oh yeah, this is just really rewarding. I have this beautiful lush soil, and then in like 2 weeks you realize it's like compact and light brown and dried out, and weeds are forming. And that's because tilling is just, you're working really hard to battle a healthy natural process.
So someone else that I had around this time last year on the program, Steve Larson, he's actually doing something similar to what you're doing at the local commercial scale, where he's doing no-till in Ohio, Akron, Ohio area, and to where he has enough produce to make a profit and sell to local restaurants and things like that. And so I love how what you're doing is at the family level, like in town. And what he's doing, he's able to show it at a different scale, this example of these methods being applied at like the local commercial scale as well. The other thing that comes to mind too is that there's a thought where it's like, okay, like, I mean, just like the Cain and Abel story, right? There's like the distinction between, okay, there's gardening and then there's city building and everything that goes along with that. There's like um, what God does through plants, and we're kind of tending it because we can coach, but we can't like go in the game and like grow corn, like there's a lot out of our hands when it comes to that. But then with city building, that's like artificially constructing things according to, design that we came up with. And you could see that in our city planning, where it's like, okay, we have the city and the buildings and the factories, and then the streets and asphalt and those things. And then on outside of the city, that's where we do our farming and that's where we do our gardening. But then you look at your project and it's not the case at all. It's actually like inside of the city, at the heart of the city is the garden. And then within the garden is the home. And you've created these really interesting layers where it's not like you have to go far away. You have it integrated into your home life. And from what I know personally, in you being an excellent cook in your own right, I remember having was it lemon, garlic, rosemary potatoes with homemade bread and, cheeses and everything else. It's like, it's not just at the plant, like I can grow this thing. It's like, okay, I can grow this thing. Now what? So maybe you could share some other things that you do once you actually harvest, like what's some advice or some things that you do once you actually have the food in hand?
Yeah. So, like you said, like this, there are a few things rewarding, especially as like an artistic, from musician to just cooking, all those things, like definitely, the right portion of my brain. There are a few things more rewarding than going outside and just picking my own stuff and using them in the kitchen to create something awesome. It just, things are not just more healthy, because they really are. Even if something was grown really well, by the time it gets to you, it's losing so many of its beneficial properties.
Mm-hmm.
And nutrient rich soil like this, it's incredible. Organic is great, but that doesn't mean it's like super healthy and nutrient rich, right?
There's some shortcuts along the way to USDA organic labeling.
Yeah, exactly. I'm sure. So yeah, it's healthier, but it also tastes better, like so much better when you grow it yourself. And most people are, they totally agree with that. Anyone who's gardened before, and you compare a store-bought tomato to your own, it's like night and day.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, like so I love going out there and just harvesting and cooking like right on the spot. I love also just cooking some kind of dish in the kitchen, and I'm like, oh shoot, I need thyme or oregano or rosemary or something like that. I just like walk outside and get my own. We also have chickens, by the way, so we love getting our own eggs. It's fantastic, and they've become such an integral part of our little ecosystem on our property, because it's like part of like.
That's a good way to say it. You've created this little quarter-acre ecosystem.
Absolutely.
At the family level. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and as closed and connected as possible, which animals just do that. They're just so part of the equation. I mean, that's one of the reasons why they're around. It's just incredible. It's an incredible, it's intelligent, like created, beautiful system that we live in, where we just see this synergy. Like I don't see resistance and survival of the fittest. I actually see the opposite. I see synergy, this beautiful working together. Even when you think that they're working against each other, they're actually working with each other, if we will allow ourselves to see it in nature. So it's just a beautiful picture. But yeah. So to answer your question, like I just love, the first thing is just bringing it inside and preparing it, for us and for people that we serve. Love it. Another thing that Kirsten, my beautiful wife, and I do is we ferment. We love fermentation. Absolutely. We definitely have the fermentation bug. I could mean that in a few different ways, but like
it's a cultural thing, right?
Right. So we started with like kombucha, and now we're doing like water kefir. We're doing goat's milk kefir or kefir. Just all the kafirs, and we've done krauts. We make our own pickles. So we'll take the not just cucumbers, but green beans, and even like small zucchini spears, by the way, if anyone's listening and they have like a lot of zucchini at one time, during the growing months, which like I know happens to a lot of people. They're like,
Oh, yeah.
I don't know what's zucchini. Well, like try pickles, just cut into little spears, and especially when they're kind of young and small, they make great pickles. They're kind of like cucumber pickles. So
Cool.
So yeah, we've been doing a lot of fermentation and really experimenting in long-term storage using fermentation, because that's what all of our ancestors did before they had refrigerators. And then also we're discovering like what can store very long. Like, for instance, speaking of zucchinis, we're discovering that we've actually been able to save zucchinis for months. Like where we have like our last zucchini like end of December or January 1st, when we ended in like September, October. And that's simply by letting the zucchini or summer squash ripen all the way, or at least get very big and mature. And as long as they're pretty mature, they will save in kind of a cool spot in your kitchen or your pantry. They'll actually save for like a very long time. Maybe it's just our climate. I'm not sure, because it's very dry here. But yeah, things like that. The winter squashes do fantastic. Things like that. So yeah, it's just kind of part of a culinary adventure that we constantly have, and we're always trying new fermented things and just having a good time.
Evan, you remind me a lot of the picture of Adam pre-fall, where there's this little window of him naming things. And, a lot of people get mixed up, right? Because in that creation story, there's like the word dominion. And I feel like that word dominion like gets really taken to the wrong side of the room, so to speak. But in that picture, he's calling out the pattern of identity within distinct individual species or animals, or kinds would be the best word to look at it, where he's not forcing them, he's not doing anything. They're distinct, but he's simply calling out what is. And I see that your method is following in line with that, because you're not like trying to like shove certain things into your design. You're adjusting your design based on the identity of the plants that are part of your ecosystem. And then furthermore, what I'm seeing too is that there's a harmony that takes place around the context of your beautiful home. It's like a 2-story farmhouse. I love it. And it's just surrounded by all of these green plants and animals as well. And it's like what you do in the dominion of your home and that property is you've actually turned that towards good, to where it benefits nature, to where there's more things that can live there harmoniously. There's more things that can thrive there. The soil makes the plants happier, and the happier plants makes the birds and the birds of the air, right, happier. And you've actually allowed more species to coexist there than in even the regular climate that's surrounding your guys' place.
Yeah, I love it. Love it. Yeah, thanks, man. That kind of touches home too, because that principle of dominion, a lot of times people have a bad taste in their mouth, like you said, when they hear that. But that's because we're identifying that dominion off of the abuse and destruction that the fall of man has created, and that thing that's in the hearts of people, whether knowingly or even unknowingly, sometimes, to create destruction and destructive habits, destruction in everything that they do. And I just mean, like, just look at what we're doing to the earth, right? I mean, like, we could all see that, or what we do to other people, very very often. So yeah, I just love that, because that it just had to be that way. Like as far as like Adam, and his dominion, I just know you're exactly right about that, because God who has ultimate authority and dominion, right? Like he's a creator of the heavens and the earth, and he's the most powerful person in all the universe, and he can do whatever he wants, basically, decided to come as a man to humble himself that way, right? Like as Christ, to be born of a woman, born under sin and under law, and give himself to the death, right? For the creation and the people that he loved, like, and so exemplifying the ultimate servant leadership. Like, and then he gives us this total free will. Like, yes, he's a fierce and incredibly powerful being, but he's also a gentleman, and so to love us the way that he does, and to be this good, like when God's in charge, it's good. When fallen man is in charge, it's like not
could
good.
go either way. Well, like, you're totally right. Cause like we often forget that with pretty much most things. It's like with leadership or with decisions about how to cultivate plants, our default is that we assume, at least, where we come from in the West, like if man's involved, it's going to be dark, it's going to be destructive, but we also need to keep in mind that there's a possibility of light and life. And so, like dominion could look negatively authoritarian or tyrannical or destructive or abusive, but then it can also create space for life, or it can create like an order, like a trellis, where a plant could actually use that order and that structure to climb higher towards heaven and the sun than it could without it.
Yeah, exactly. Power does not have to mean corruption, right? Like it doesn't have to be synonymous with destruction. I mean, but we do have those examples before us in all of history. Look how much women have been abused and oppressed throughout history. Look how much slavery has been taking place throughout history. Look how much our culture can't even reconcile men and women, and at some point the pendulum is going to swing totally like too much the other direction. And it's just like we see these injustices and destructive things all the time. But like God is powerful, but he's good, right? And so when a person comes under him and fears him and wants to love and joins the way of love, leaving his life and his self-seeking nature behind, and like seeks to love others. That's why like what Jesus said is like just so brilliant about loving others and laying his life down for others. Dan Mohler, probably my favorite preacher ever, said this one thing: like the biggest problem, bar none, that we have in the world is every person thinking for themselves, right?
Yeah.
So like when love reigns, it is beautiful, it is good, and then we can actually accept and be okay with the fact that we are powerful. Like we are powerful beings, very powerful. We have the power to tear down or build up. But like when we can celebrate our power because we are loving and giving ourselves to others in that beautiful fashion, it's like everything changes.
Yeah, I think the element of dominion is one thing, but if people were to read on, there's an element of stewardship, or the calling of stewardship, that you find in the Garden of Eden creation story, where I think we forget that too, where it's like that's part of the original design, or the first picture, the first pattern that was announced, that we have the opportunity to still carry out. And so in that call of stewardship, a big part of that is leading and serving, not like dominating, or dragging around or enslaving, right? Ordering. It's actually something that lifts up from below and says, you know what, like it's not me, it's just me trying to help out and to order and to serve things that allow them to grow and to thrive as well.
Yeah, it's really good, Derek, and something you said just sparked me as well. Here's another like dual principle, right? Love, it never takes. It doesn't take in this selfish way. It only gives. And so when you transfer that to the garden, like the principles of permaculture, right? And just regenerative design and the cutting edge of organic farming these days is realizing that we need to give back instead of taking. Like we're always taking,
Mm-hmm.
taking this life and matter from the soil, and then we just give back because we have to in the form of like salt-based destructive fertilizers. It's like it's really bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in the garden, you're out there and you're realizing, like with these permaculture principles, like, oh wow, okay, so it's about giving. It's like even if I take, like taking in a way that I'm actually giving in return at the same time, right? Because for instance, plucking the fruit off a plant is actually like a good thing, right? Or pruning, which, oh my gosh, pruning is like loaded, in all sorts of principles, no matter where you are, like, if you have faith or don't have faith, or wherever you are in life, there are so many amazing, helpful things, principles in the garden and in pruning. But yeah,
you gotta prune back the dead stuff. You absolutely do. All that stuff that is not producing life culturally, societally, like in you, like you have to allow those things to go to make room for the newness to come.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And with the picture that we have of the garden, it's really imperative to remember too that Christ is the last Adam, right? And if you look at his life, he's the life of a plant. Right? He's actually carrying that out. So he's like, he is humanity, but he's also the tree. Right? Because like he laid his life down, he was sown into the womb of the earth, and then he rose up with resurrection. I don't think it was a mistake that all of this was taking place at springtime, right? And so at the time of recording this conversation, we're just right before March 20th, right? So right before it is officially spring. And then right after that is Pascha, or Holy Week, right? With the Resurrection Sunday. And you look at the seasons and the patterns of the year and the earth, they fall in line with the life of Christ. And through his being sown into the earth in death and then being raised up with resurrection, what's happening here is that's exactly what winter into spring does. Like, at least around here, most trees don't have leaves on them. They look dead, right? Yeah. There's more death. There's more like brown leaves decaying, returning to the soil, right? Like this cycle of life, all of a sudden, the light starts to get a little bit brighter. Yeah. And then things get a little bit greener. And then what do you know? There's just this emergence and this explosion of rebirth, of recreation. And we start it all over again. Mm-hmm. And we see these 4 seasons carrying out like into epochs or even ages, where like that's really the Christian claim, is like what started in the garden, many, many years ago, ends in a garden with like the winter turning into spring, with the end of this age and the return of Christ. And the return of Christ comes the new spring, or the new age that's supposed to come.
Yeah, it's so good, man. And yeah, with that last Adam thing, it's just so true. And what part of what that reveals as well is that Jesus is like the prototype, right? Like he is the type of redeemed man. So we can see God's intent for what our life is supposed to look like in the life of Jesus. Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, that right there was a revelation that also changed my life big time. That I can see God's intent for my life in the life of Jesus. A lot of people will be like, "Oh no, can't do that. That's just Jesus." No, actually, Jesus said to do it, right? So like through that new creation process, that second Adam, recreation. My favorite scripture verse is, for if any man be in Christ, he is a new creation. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The old things are gone, and behold, the new has come. So that new creation, that let's try this again, and this time it's for good. This is gonna the whole mystery of my intent from the beginning is revealed, and I'm restoring all things, and I'm restoring people back to what we had in the beginning, so that they and God, man and God, can be together again. It's all found in Christ, and because I talk to a lot of people of different faiths and different beliefs, and again, I so respect you no matter where you're at. I love you no matter where you're at, and I just always appreciate people even just giving me a minute to listen, and it's just awesome, and I love listening to those as well. But like a big thing we get is like, man, I'm okay with that Jesus guy. I'm not always okay with Christians, and when that's an issue, I just so apologize, because what you're getting when you see that is not people who represent Christ, but Christians are getting it, we have to look at Christ and not like the belief, like I would beg of you to consider Christ and not fallen man, right? But the invitation is just beautiful, because some people are being able to walk in this because of God's gift, and being able to live a life that is actually like Jesus, because that's what he actually wants. It's not a pride thing. Like, God is like, no, like, I want you to have my nature on this earth. I want you to be able to love people the way that I love them, and lay your life down for the way that I did, and he
wants the garden to be abundant too. Like, that's pretty apparent. So the other thing, when we talk about rebirth or recreation, is that of the Sabbath, right? Because in the garden story, there's 6 days and God creates, right? And it starts with like these really big, broad categories of like darkness and light, right? And then it's like water and dry land, and then it works its way from like, the animals that fly in the heavens, and then the creepy crawly things on earth and man. But then day 7 is what? It's the rest. God rests. It's the Sabbath day. And Sabbath and rest are closely associated with death. If you look at, at the end of the day, we rest. It's kind of a mini death in a way. And then whenever the sun comes up, it's like, it's a new day and you're alive again. And so when you look at winter carries out that same pattern very closely, because just like I described with like the oak trees around here, or any of the plants, right? They die. Our lilies, they die. Our bulbed plants, they die. But then what's happening right now is you're starting to see the buds, and we're starting to see this recreation. So I'm just wondering, like, where are things in your garden that you see that Sabbath as being like this death that then brings newness in life? And then my second question is, do you practice the 7th year rest of the land whenever it comes to your garden, like we read in the scriptures?
Yeah, I love that you asked that, because I was just thinking about this today, and I'm probably going to do a video on this about figs, because a lot of people love figs, and I think they should, because figs are amazing.
Oh yeah,
fresh figs. If you've never had a fresh fig, this is not like fig Newtons. This is like the most delicious. They're just amazing, right?
Yep.
Like fresh,
pure nectar. Fig. It's beautiful.
Totally, and you would know, Derek, because you're from California. But
and you and I. It's kind of a side story, but we're on a little day trip in a car, and we come across these plants on just the side of the road, in this mountain road, and we found this fig tree. And I swear to you, we must have filled like a 5-gallon bucket. We did our very best, and it was this wild fig tree growing on the side of the road. And man, those are delicious.
It makes me so mad in a playful way, because like
that doesn't happen in Colorado.
Never. I was even looking at I think California, the what do you call them, like the plant and like the wild plant administration, whatever it's called. But like, they have this like special website for like noxious and invasive plants and stuff, and fig was on that. I'm like, oh, like you guys could just grow these things. Yeah, you could just throw a seed out on the road and somehow it'll like germinate. It's just incredible, and grow into a fig tree. Over here, I have to like build myself an entire recycled window greenhouse, by the way.
Oh man. Yeah. Do
just
get
so I
to
can
that
get,
before we're done.
yeah. Just so I can get some to grow, so, but yeah, it's just so fun. But anyway, yeah. So I was just thinking about how like it's really important to realize before you get a fig and other similar plants and plant them in your living room or by a window if you live in a cold climate. Like you have to realize that this fig needs a dormant season. It is not like a tropical plant that stays green all year. Its natural process is to have that time of rest, right, and lose its leaves, go dormant. Doesn't even need that long, as it specifically pertains to the fig. But it needs that. And then once it comes out in the spring, these nodes begin to pop out, and there's like these extra buds that become figs. So it's interesting you mention that because it kind of underlines this principle that in order to be fruitful, like you need rest, and the best type of fruit comes out of rest, like I used to try to produce fruit. Like I used to try to do good things and be a good person or whatever. But what's really incredible, and I hope like you hear my heart in this, whatever, like, but when I was changed from the inside out and was regenerated and enjoy this relationship with God and knowing him like all the time, every day with his spirit living in me, now like the fruit just comes, like it's from the inside out. It flows. I'm no longer trying or striving to produce fruit. It's happening, like all these amazing things are coming out. I'm like, whoa, like, and it's incredible. Like, and again, like I don't mean to sound like prideful at all in that. Like, to me, it's humbling. It's incredible, but it's the same idea as like, if I go to my apple tree later on this summer, if I say to my apple tree, because I might talk to my plants all the time, I'd be like, dude, like, how did you get those apples? That's incredible. Like, you must have worked really hard. And the apple tree would just look at me and be like, like all I did was grow and rest in the winter, like I had rest and I just am who I am and I'm rooted in the soil and out comes this fruit.
Yeah.
And so that's
Totally.
how I want my life to be, like I want to be rooted and grounded in love, rooted and grounded in the person of God, and just let it flow from there, because I'm like a plant being nourished. I'm just drawing out, like what I'm rooted in, right? I'm drawing up from, and I'm just drawing from the sun, and I'm producing fruit, for anyone to pick, and it's just good.
So many things, Evan. Like the tree is the pillar that upholds the universe from heaven above and the earth below, and just like what you said, it kind of mediates. It creates like, oh yeah, there's so many good things in that, where there's fine leaves and branches and bigger branches in the trunk, right? But then there's roots below, and it's just like an awesome picture of how the certain order, right, could maintain like, I guess you could say like all of the variety or all of the mediating differences that are held together by that trunk, above and below. But then the other thing that comes to mind to add to what you're talking about with the fig tree is the fact that, I believe I learned this from you, is that you have to trim back a fig tree because the fruit only grows from the new growth branches of that year. And so
that kind of depends on the fig variety.
Okay. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. But I will say this, pruning is absolutely huge. It's amazing that taking something away, such as the practice of pruning, is actually one of the, it is one of the things that spur on growth more than anything else, even fertilizer and everything. Pruning is like, it's a stimulator of growth and fruit, very often. Sometimes there are plants that that need to produce fruit on the second year's growth. So if you prune it, actually
okay.
get fruit, right? So you kind of have to know what you're doing with pruning.
That's
But
part of that
yeah,
stewardship process, right? But then,
yeah, yeah.
it's
So
also a really good example of the, the Christian tenet of repentance, right? Where you actually like repent or trim off the old and say no to that, and yes, to make room for the new to come, to rejuvenate you so you can be fruitful. If
yes,
like, I don't just take like, I don't know, like sexual immorality, right? So that's something that if you continue to do that, it'll produce death, right? It'll harm others around you. It could destroy who you are. It could destroy all of your dreams. It could lead to divorce. It could destroy you financially. It could destroy, you psychologically. It could destroy, like a divorce could destroy not just your immediate family, but like both families that are grafted into that union. And then it could have like that, how would you call it? That generational effect, where then it affects your kids, who affects their kids. And you could just see like, oh my goodness, this thing is spreading. But repentance is that which could bring about a healing from that, to where you cut that off and all of those repercussions don't happen, and you make room for the healing part, to where now suddenly you could be fruitful, and it could bless your kids, it could bless your family, it could bless your mind and your finances and everything else around you, like all of the domains of your being.
yeah, yeah, and exactly. And pruning, that repentance and willingness to say to the great gardener, like, I'm here, I receive exactly what you want to do. Take away the things that don't belong, take away the
Mm-hmm.
leftovers from my previous life, and like however you word it, right? Like, and you entrust God to go ahead and prune you, because Jesus says that he talks about the vine and the branches, and I am the vine, you are the branches, remain in me, and you'll produce much fruit, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that God cleans those he loves. In the Greek, it's actually prunes. So depending on the translation, so it really speaks to that light, momentarily painful, like just a quick pain
Mm-hmm.
that has an eternal glory and future glory to it, right? So
It's like going to the dentist,
yeah,
like
right. Yeah, except that, yeah, I don't know if that suffices as a, well, maybe, but yeah, it's amazing, because when I'm pruning a fruit tree, it's like I do wonder if sometimes if my fruit tree is like, what'd you do that for, but like that's part of like that tending and ruling and reigning, and that good dominion
Mm-hmm.
in the garden, as the good gardener that will actually take these actions so that the tree is better off in the long run and is that much more fruitful.
Mm-hmm. Well, I also want to tie back into that city and garden parallel, where if you were to apply what you just said to ruling and reigning in a city, and the idea that we can have a good king that rules and reigns, or good leadership, right, over government, over schools, over church, over, whatever structures of organization you usually have in the city. What does that look like? What if we tend to our architecture like you do with your fig trees? What if we nourish and water the soil in a way that we do at our schools? Like what if suddenly the stewardship isn't just like an agricultural practice? What happens if it's actually like what we do in the city, right? And then all of a sudden, everything we talked about heaven and earth and the union between the two, stewardship, dominion, all of those things being carried out at the city level. What do you think that looks like?
Something amazing. I just love the idea of seeing these principles, these what I call Eden restored, like restored Eden principles, because that's just the beauty of what I believe the invitation from God is. It just literally is. It's a restoration of a relationship, and a beautiful one. And again, I am always so sorry to everyone that has heard it any other way, as some weird manipulating power struggle of man, or yeah, you know what I mean? Like, people have used even God's name for their advantage in a selfish and
Mm.
harmful way.
Hmm.
But yeah, that is the beautiful picture. And I kind of have my own dream of like seeing this place, whether it's this quarter acre or hundreds of acres or whatever it is, where people live this way because they're totally healed, body, soul, and spirit, and also their relationship with the land is healed, and the land itself is healed. Because when you look at the fall of man and the curse, like, it was a curse of the man but also of the land, and there was this direct correlation and relationship between the two.
Hmm.
So just knowing these effects, and but just seeing this Eden, peace and relationship and restoration, like, displayed in this place, wherever it is. But right now I have a quarter acre of something. I'm like, I almost said created, and I guess it is creating, right? But like we talked about before, I'm realizing that it's more just like cooperating with God,
Hmm.
cooperating with
Hmm.
with nature, cooperating with what we see. So, right now I'm just working on this ecosystem, but starting with the nucleus, which is like my home, my family, the relationships that I cherish the most, just in my own household, and seeing that come outward, and hopefully seeing the beauty of that imprint and that design, implemented in the garden as well, and in the land around.
Hmm. An example that I really like of, like, say, like the city is representing like the artificial that man comes up with, uh, being entwined with the garden that is like just taking care of what God has designed and put together, is your window. I don't know what you want to call it, that like greenhouse that you constructed off the side of your house that looks totally epic. It's like a little jungle growing in there. But then you guys, he made an awesome video about this. You can see it in more detail. He gets into it, but essentially, Evan, if you would, let me just describe it. So basically, you take like a tube and you bury it into the ground inside this greenhouse, and then it comes out the other side with like a fan. And you would think, okay, so in the summertime, the ground's cool. So it's getting that like thermally cool air down below, and then it's just blowing it in the greenhouse, is keeping it cool whenever you guys have like your long stretches of no clouds and all sun and high temperatures and dry heat over in Colorado. But then it also works on the flip side over in the wintertime, because then you have the ground which is actually warmer than the temperature outside. And so, like this year, you guys got tons of snow. And meanwhile, in your greenhouse, it's like, well, it's pretty warm and happy in there. And it's like, not, you didn't bring in like big heaters and that need generators, or you didn't bring in like these big turbines that, have misting and cooling. And like, you were using technology and the things of the city in conjunction with the energy and the properties of the earth in order to come up with something that's super simple and saves you energy and makes the plants happy.
Absolutely, Derek. Yeah, no, you did a great job
Oh,
explaining that.
thanks.
And yeah, it's called a subterranean heating and cooling system, or
Precisely.
sometimes called or called a climate battery. And yeah,
Mhm.
I definitely don't claim originality in that. In fact, I actually pulled it offline before they took the plans down, because the
Mm.
creators of this revolutionary thing have been very successful, in promoting it and selling it across the world, because they save a lot of people a lot of money. And the beautiful thing is, like, yeah, like you're saying, in its connection to the city now, it's just like, yeah, it's not taking it. It takes so little power to run this thing with a very low powered fan that we didn't even see a dent in the electric bill, like nothing. So really amazing. And if someday I can get like a better system in place, because I've learned from my mistakes, and get like a solar power um, system in place, or some solar panels, I would. And that kind of just comes back to, yeah, I mean, I think it's a profound question, Derek. Is like, what does that look like? What does this Eden thing look like in the city? And like, I don't know, like I haven't really spent a whole lot of time on that yet, except for just like, I guess, I also ask a question is like what does love expressed look like? Like, what is the expression of love in the city, right? Like, what does that look like? When we can learn from the creator and love himself and just love unconditionally, like true love. Yeah, like what is the expression of love and Eden Restored look like, even in technology in the city? And of course, it's going to have something to do with like always giving and never taking, especially like not taking at the expense of another, right? So like there's a taking for survival in life, but like I know that there's a way to see the beauty of this expression of love and the new creation in this fashion that never, like it never takes in an unjust sort of fashion, but always gives and always blesses.
All right, Evan, one more thing to leave the people with, maybe some links or some resources, how they can get a hold of you or get in contact with what you do.
Yeah, so man, this stuff just happened, but yeah, just a few places. So number one is YouTube. It's called The Integrated Garden. So you'll see me on there. Yeah, we just cover, on this channel, I just really cover the actual ins and outs of gardening and tips and tricks and just different pieces of advice for that. I kind of keep it just like at that level for now, and it's been really fun. Also, which we didn't even close to cover, we'll have to do it again, but music. I've been teaming up with a great friend and musician named Jeremy Strand. And so on YouTube as well as any other platform out there, really, you can look up Jeremy Strand Music, and just been having a ball with that. And there's even like these videos that we're releasing that are like a message behind the music. And, some of these very principles that we're talking about today are on that. We have a few already. We're actually about to release another one about the restoration of the relationship between God and people. So that'll be
Perfect.
fun.
Awesome.
Yeah. So those are just two for now. I have my own like little music channel as well on YouTube. I think it's like Evan Doukas Music. Haven't done much on that, but I might be adding to it. So
okay, cool.
Yeah. And then Rumble is another one. I'm looking to just put these videos on other platforms as well besides YouTube. But for now, YouTube's great, and keep doing what you're doing, man. I love the insight and the depth that you go into. So yeah, really enjoying it.
Appreciate it, Evan. Okay, man. That is all for now. Everybody, I encourage you to go like and subscribe his channel, as well as this one if you haven't already. Let us know what you think in the comments below. And yeah, until next conversation.